There you go.
Well, and it truly is a paradox when you get to the end of this movie and realize that if he hadn't, none of this would have worked out.
That is also very true.
Good point.
Oh, is that true?
Javier, I love you, sir. You're my favorite water skier, buddy. Welcome to the What's Our Verdict podcast, where we fashion ourselves cinematic judge and jury. My name is JJ Crowder. I'm here with my co-hosts, Mattson Mattson.
Better red than dead.
Javier Ortiz.
What is up, my nerds?
And Ian Anderson.
Some shit.
Do you ever find yourself wondering if you should spend the time, money, or both on a movie? We are here to answer that question for you. Each week we put a movie on trial, discuss the facts, pass judgment, and let you know our verdict. We do appreciate if you'd hit that follow or subscribe button, tell a friend about us, help us grow the podcast. Go check out our website, subscribe to our email list for exclusive content and some updates here and there. Today we're reviewing Tenet. It was released September 3rd, 2020. It was written and directed by Christopher Nolan. It stars John David Washington, Robert Pattinson, Elizabeth Debicki, and Kenneth Branagh. Armed with only one word, Tenet, and fighting for the survival of the entire world, a protagonist journeys through a twilight world of international espionage on a mission that will unfold in something beyond real time. So, if you guys are joining us for the first time or need a reminder, we will start this with a spoiler-free review, where each of us will provide some quick thoughts on the film and provide you with a rating based on a 3-tiered scale. Worth it, meaning in our opinion, it's worth the investment to go see the movie in theaters where possible. With that rating, we do not encourage anyone to take risks with their health for the sake of a movie, so be safe if you decide to go. Stream it, meaning we'd recommend waiting until it's available to stream from the comfort of your own home. And finally, skip it, meaning exactly what it sounds like. No need to watch this movie. So let's jump in, give spoiler-free reviews. Ian, why don't you get us started?
Shoot, man. How do I get started on this? This was awesome. Like, I thoroughly enjoyed all of it. It's a long movie, like 2.5 hours, but I walked out not ever having asked myself or felt like this was too long, because I just enjoyed it the whole way through. So worth it. So worth it.
Sweet. Mattson.
You guys know I was absolutely hyped for this movie. Love Christopher Nolan. And to me, this movie did not disappoint. Like Ian just said, time flew by quickly. I wasn't sure if I was getting inverted or if who knows where I was during this movie. But the acting was superb. The Christopher Nolan spin about what I was watching, the cerebral nature of this film, the action of this film really hit for me. I'm still trying to make a lot of sense of what I watched, but that's what I love in a good Christopher Nolan movie. This movie deserves to be watched, so watch it in theaters because it plays well on the big screen. The music, the drama, the gravitas of what we're watching. I encourage all of you, go watch this movie.
Yeah, this movie is a mind bender for sure. Go in expecting to come out not fully understanding what you just watched, but it's worth the watch. It's fun. It's entertaining. It makes you think a lot during the movie. It makes you think a lot after the movie. Yeah, there's some crazy stuff that happens. It's quite the... Anything else just kind of starts to give away the things that are running through my head. So I'll leave it at that, but definitely worth it. Go check it out. It's really worth seeing in a theater if you have that ability, because it is just a spectacle, and it's epic and it's huge. So yeah, definitely worth it. Javier, wrap us up.
Guys, I'm going to level with you. I have no idea what happened. If you put a gun to my head right now and asked me to explain to you what a temporal pincer move is, I couldn't. I would die.
I got it. Well, it's good because in this movie, ignorance is bliss. So you're good.
Yeah. Oh boy, I am riding that ignorance train, baby. So I guess, yeah, it is worth watching it in theater. If you're anything like me and you have a hard time hearing dialogue and you normally watch movies with subtitles, the movie theater is not going to be kind or forgiving to you because they speak through a mask half the movie. Yeah, there's a lot of it's very difficult. It was very difficult for me to hear the dialogue. So I would say for the visual, yeah, watch it in theater, but maybe you should stream it afterwards to get a better idea of what was being said in the movie. You know what I'm saying?
I see that.
Mm-hmm.
So a worth it, stream it combination.
Yeah, worth it, and then stream it when you have a chance, or just give up on yourself and just watch White House Down.
It's a very Christopher Nolan thing. If you look back on all his movies, they're all very loud. And for some reason, he loves to have people deliver dialogue with masks on. So it is a struggle. That is one thing that I I even struggled. There were times, and I love music in films, but there were times when I was watching it going, geez, can you make it any louder?
Yeah, the score was so loud.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm glad I'm not the only one.
So I could definitely get what you're saying. No. I thought that, but I've always thought that watching Christopher Nolan movies. Yeah, so it sounds like it's consensus. It's worth it. Go check it out. Like I said, it's a spectacular movie in every way, shape, or form. Yeah, so enjoy. If you haven't seen it, which since we all saw it the early access, you might not have seen it. There's a good chance you haven't. Pause now, go watch this movie, come back, pick up where you left off, because we're about to drop spoilers. We're going to do our deep dive now, so be prepared. If you're ready to join us and follow us through this crazy-ass journey, let's do this. Let's just start off where this thing begins, and it's with a raid on a Ukraine opera house in which a 3-man team, CIA agents blending in with Ukrainian SWAT, attempt to exfiltrate an embedded agent.
Oh, is that why they're there?
Yeah.
Got it. Okay.
Yeah, the white guy that's sitting in there with a bunch of Russians with guns.
Yes, I do remember him. Okay. I'm following.
I liked how this movie started off with a bang. I remember sitting next to Javier and literally it was 40 seconds in. We all was because it went right into it. And I was like, okay.
You pan into the orchestra, right? And you've got the dude who's leading the music, whatever his title is.
Conductor.
And then the conductor. And as the music starts, on the beat, boom, a gunshot rings out and the conductor's just dead. I'm like, oh, snap. It had a very Batman bank robbery feel to it,
Yeah, it was very Dark Knight-ish entry.
Yes.
I loved it.
No, it was really entertaining. It was a fun way to start a movie. And it's the only way you can start this movie, which we'll find out as we talk about it. Because you start it any other way besides this cold open into action, and there's too many questions being asked, or you are answering them right out the gate. And if you do that, then it negates the end of most of this movie. Because most of this movie is a giant what the hell's happening question, right? And you, from start to finish, are trying to figure out why. After this initial scene where, you're introduced to the protagonist, he's sitting in the back of this, and the Americans wake up and they have a slew of different law enforcement badges that they could have stuck on their shirts.
That's super cool.
They hand them the ones that showed up. Yeah. So they were prepared for any group to show up to fight this terrorist attack or whatever it was. Yeah. It's crazy. So then they go through and they end up saving this guy. That team gets away with whatever it was. They were talking about being nuclear. So they get away with plutonium is what it is at the beginning. But he gets captured along with one other guy as they're leaving this. And in the midst of that, he sees really weird shit with a bullet and some guy he doesn't know. So you're introduced to this mystery guy. The bullet, as we've seen in the previews, goes backwards into this guy's gun and saves his life. And then he's captured shortly after by the same team that sent him in, oddly enough. And he's tortured on a railroad track. It's twisted.
Yeah, so he's pulling out his teeth, right? That's what he's doing?
Yeah,
they're pulling out his teeth.
One by one.
That sucks, dude.
I would have given him up.
Oh, yeah, no shit. I would not have been part of Tenet.
I don't even think I would get to a tooth being pulled before I was like, yeah, you want to know so-and-so? You want to know so-and-so? Here's their mother's name. You can find them here on a weekend.
Some of them I might know their blood type.
The only reason why I wouldn't be able to do that is because I'm terrible with names. And I'd be like, I'm pretty sure his name was John. We all just called him Bigfoot, though. Otherwise, I would totally sing like a bird before being tortured.
Well, he got so lucky in his own mind because the guy that they tortured right before him, they tip him over thinking he's dead, and he's alive, and they steal his cyanide pill from the CIA, and his little partner's holding the cyanide pill there at the end of the torture as they're getting ready to reset the clock and torture him some more. He pulls up the cyanide pill, dives in, takes it, and of course I'm sitting there going, wow, they're going to kill this guy right out the gate. We're going to start this time travel shit early. But no, they just put him in a coma and fix his mouth.
So was that all a test, or was that a real situation and the test was the pill?
So the real situation was, God, I don't want to go into this too deep because this is a conversation that needs to happen at the end of this conversation.
But this is an appropriate movie to skip to the end.
It's
right?
not, I mean, technically, in a way, the test, what leads them to trusting him to become part of Tenet is the fact that he took the pill. He was willing to die without telling anyone anything and giving up any information at all. So that's why when he wakes up, the guy that's there tells him the word Tenet, shows him the fingers interlocking symbol that together will get him moving through this organization.
I mean, to be fair, the guy was dead anyway, so it's either die now with some of your teeth or die later, right? So, I mean, is that really such a big deal? Like, is that a ballsy? I don't want to cheapen his sacrifice. I'm just saying, kind of took the easy way out, and I don't know if we want to be rewarding that behavior. It's all I'm saying as a potential employer.
Considering that cyanide is an acidic
Shut up,
property
Javier.
that will destroy.
Yeah, it's like
I'd rather
eating
be
hot
shot
pizza.
in the head. I'd rather be shot in the head than have to swallow it like eating hot pizza. You're fucking stupid.
To be
All
fair,
right, so
I don't know that pulling teeth was the worst torture mentioned in this movie, because there's definitely another one that was a little too specific and painted a
which one?
picture.
Oh, yeah.
we'll talk about
Yeah,
it.
Oh, yes, the ball thing.
There you go.
Ball thing. There you go. So let's jump now. He goes to this is where the shit starts to get weird, because he uses the signal that he was just shown in Tenet to get through the door in the science lab where he meets the little scientist lady who explains to him inversion, shows him the wall with the bullets, how he's catching the bullets, the scene you see in the trailer. That's where everything starts to go a little weird. And we start to learn about this inversion, the fact that anything can be inverted in theory. And we don't know yet. She thinks it's about World War III because, that whole ignorance is our weapon thing. Nobody actually really knows everything. So what do you guys think of that whole explanation of inversion?
My mind kind of melted for a bit as I tried to figure out how that worked, because it doesn't, but it does, apparently.
So the idea is that inversion switches the entropy of an object, right? Like that's the explanation that they gave us.
Yes.
It becomes effect before cause, I think they mentioned in the movie.
Yes.
Now, I'm
It's-
lost.
I figured that wasn't going to help Javier.
No, I know I'm thinking too linearly, but I can't help it because that is the world that we live in.
You got to change how you view the world, Javier.
Okay, sorry, continue. I'll pretend
Well, no,
like
it's
I know
good.
what I'm talking about.
One thing I liked about this scene is that it kicks off the crazy visuals when she's playing like dance with the bullet on the table and it's flip flopping all over the damn table. So she can explain you got to kind of use instinct and what you're feeling for it because everything's in reverse. It was really cool the way that they made that bullet dance around and flip flop all over the table. I really was like, okay, visually, this is already stunning out the gate. So great way to introduce that shit. So this is the first time too that the protagonist shows he's very good at his job, meaning being a spy, because he asked the lady, can you figure out what the metals are that were in these munitions and where they came from? And he uses that to deduce that they came from India, and then needs to get in and see the Indian arms dealer guy, which is Sanjay Singh. So he calls an old CIA contact and they give him a go-between, which is Neil. So you're introduced to Neil. So Robert Pattinson is Neil, and he helps him infiltrate this compound of Sanjay Singh. And this also is a fun scene. The reverse bungee jump up the damn wall.
Pretty cool.
That's also in the trailer.
I will say, though, that was a incredible performance by Robert Pattinson. Like, I've been low-key a little worried about him playing Batman because all I've ever seen him in is Twilight. And to be honest, I didn't really watch Twilight. I watched like one scene with him. He killed it in this movie. And so I'm actually really excited to see him in other films now because he freaking rocked it.
Yeah, he did. He was really good.
It's funny that you bring that up because I have to give Casey her due. She's been a Robert Pattinson fan for a long time, and not because of Twilight. All the Twilights are garbage. It got him on the map, but his movies, he's done movies in the past that are like a lot of independent films. He's not done a lot that's major since Twilight, but he did a film called Remember Me, which is an amazingly dark and gritty, realistic story that I recommend watching. It's a great movie. He did Water for Elephants, which was also a very good performance. Strange movie.
Oh, that is a great movie with Reese Witherspoon.
Yeah, Reese Witherspoon. And he's amazing in that movie. So he is a fantastic actor. So I'm really glad that he's getting into some of these bigger films and being able to show that he is a great actor, because he does. You're right. He does a fantastic job in this film. So they use his idea to bungee jump up. And I loved his questions. Are you willing to take a child hostage? What about a woman? He's asking all these crazy questions. What are you willing to do? So they bungee jump up, and it turns out that Sanjay Singh is just a figurehead. He's not the actual weapons dealer. The weapons dealer is his wife, Priya. And
Quality win. Women can be hardcore criminals too. You know?
Yeah. Well, and she was smart about it. She's like, look, it's sometimes good to have a male leader in a male world, but I'm still running this motherfucker. So it was really, I enjoyed that flip on that. So she turns out, they have a conversation. It also turns out that she's part of Tenet. They exchange the signal and the word Tenet, and
Oh, she is? Wow.
Could only do so much for Javier.
Yeah, you missed that whole part where she said, how a man's tenets are prove the man, and he says, well, if you want to know about tenets, I can tell you can tell me everything. So that, and they do both interlock their fingers like that. So that's how he finds out that she's leading the mission to track down Sator, Andre Sator, who's played by Kenneth Branagh, also brilliantly played. Priya sends him to meet Michael Caine, who is Sir Michael Crosby.
Yeah, what was his point?
He tells the protagonist how to find Sator, the bad guy.
Okay. Mm-hmm. Yep. Mm-hmm.
So then we're introduced to Kat, and then this is where we get to finally get into the meat, what I consider the meat of this movie. So now he knows he's got to dress better, he's got to look the part of a millionaire, and then he's got to go find Kat, who is Sator's wife, this Russian oligarch's wife, who sold an illegally forged painting, which then puts her in a really shitty position with Sator, her husband. So they meet for dinner, and one of the coolest fight scenes ever in the kitchen. Brutal.
Oh, yeah.
He just goes ham on them.
Yeah. I was like, you really thought he was just going to let you freaking smash his hand with a meat tenderizer? Come on, grow up.
And he doesn't kind of beat their ass. This dude embarrasses them to the point that he beats one dude's ass with a cheese grater. And I was laughing my ass off because he's smacking him with it. And then he puts it up to his face. And I'm like, no, you're not going to do that. You're not going to do that, because I've accidentally scraped my knuckle on a cheese grater going not hard force and took a chunk of my finger. This son of a bitch pushes this thing against this dude's cheek and grinds that son of a bitch's heart. And I literally gasped. I don't usually out loud make noise in a theater. I grunted. I was like, oh God, in the theater when he did that. Cause I was like, no.
That reminded me of John Wick when the guy takes the book to the throat, the cheese grater thing. I was like, ooh, that was John Wick-esque.
That reminded me of the other movie with Denzel Washington.
Equalizer?
Equalizer, where he shoves a corkscrew up that dude's
jaw. Yeah.
It's funny. It reminded me of Punisher, where he takes the guy's face and rubs it on the glass.
Glass.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that's rough.
And all it did was remind me of peeling my knuckle off with a cheese grater. I'm glad it wasn't my face. But yeah, that was, great fight scene, though. Yeah, so through Kat, the protagonist finds out that in Oslo is where they keep this forged painting, and there's also more to this Freeport in the airport of Oslo than what just paintings. So they've started to realize through Priya that he communes with the future. And so whatever he uses to do that is probably in this airport in Oslo. So they go, and this is my favorite line, and I've seen it 100 times because it's in the last preview they showed, but Robert Pattinson going, you want to crash a plane? Well, not from the air. Don't be so dramatic.
How big of a plane?
Yeah, that part's a little dramatic. I love that line. So they get this small team, they crash this plane into the airport terminal, which causes a fire and seals off this room and allows them to get within the inner chamber of this Freeport, which they then run into, and you've seen in the previews, the corridor, they're walking with the glass partition between them and the bullet holes in it. And then comes the first version of a human being inverted. One side, there's a turnstile at the end of it. They turn, two guys, one on each side, come running out dressed in full tack gear. They come running out, and then an inverted fight begins between the protagonist and one of these guys, which was crazy shit.
Yeah, that was nuts.
Fun to watch. I'm a little worried about how much security accompanies gold, because man, if that was how light security is when you're transporting that much gold, everybody would have a field day with that.
Yeah,
right. There was 4 crates of gold bars.
I liked how that one guy on the crew, he took one for himself. That was funny.
The one soldier sneaks it, puts it in his shirt.
He snuck one in.
Was that the guy that was beaten to death later with a gold bar?
No,
different guy. Okay.
Yeah, this was part of
he was part of the henchman,
the protagonist crew. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
But I do love that scene in the plane when he's putting the food away. And he's like, is everything on here vegetarian? Because I got vegetarian. That's all I see. This looks kind of like meat. And then he chokes the dude out. Really? He gasps. He's so funny. That guy played such a funny part in this movie.
Yeah. Sorry to derail where we were going. I just had to,
No, it's part of this scene, man. That's what we want to talk about.
There was only like 4 people guarding this gold.
Yeah. And they put
Yeah.
the meals right with the gold. I mean, I feel like there should be some sort. That's beyond.
And when I say crates, it's not like the gold was in crates. The gold was just sort of piled.
Yeah, they were
Yeah.
pallets.
A net over it.
It was like pallets of gold. But it's a great distraction because those gold bars laying in the middle of the runway. More people are going to pay attention to that than the fire.
Which, speaking of that, JJ, I'm curious because you are the only one that's seen this more than once so far.
Yeah.
Did you notice in that scene, like the ambulance or like the things that you knew to look for? Were you seeing them in that scene?
Yeah. So in the second watching, the things that that you find out later you need to watch for, I saw and was like, my mind was blown that I'm like, son of a bitch. Because the one thing I did read was on Facebook. Somebody left a comment in a friend of mine who saw it too, saying, oh, the movie was great. This was great. And the directing sucked. And I'm like, how do you figure? Especially after seeing it the second time, I was like, because the amount of attention to detail that you would have to pay when we get to the end and talk about what this whole movie is to make sure that everything's in its right place every single time you see a scene. Because there are so many things that are in these scenes that you don't know until you watch it the second time are in these scenes. The direction is just amazing. The cinematography, the filmography, the writing for this movie is just so on point because of all of the overlap that takes place in this movie.
Yeah.
So I want to ask each of you guys Neil, we know he's chasing after that other SWAT character who we don't know who it is down the hall, and then grabs him, is holding the helmet, and then seemingly nothing else happens in that scene. You see him look at whatever just happened and then chooses to kind of not do anything. I thought after that he had seen himself, but we later find out it wasn't him, but obviously it was the main protagonist. Did everyone else get that? Like, did they make that? They knew that who that was, make that prediction?
For like Christopher Nolan stuff, that one seemed a little bit more obvious. So I was kind of surprised because I had the same thought where I to be fair, like I thought it was both of them, like there was 2 different people, but yeah.
So I had my hunches. The first time I watched it, I tried to go in it without trying to figure every little thing out. When it dawned on me was the conversation right after that happened with Priya, and she said that was the same person. Then I went, oh, okay, so that was him. That was the moment that I caught that. But I didn't catch it while it was happening. I just thought it was some sort of henchman. And I think part of that was because bullets were fired. My brain didn't go to immediately, oh, this is the same guy. But then after she said that's the same person, I was like, oh, okay, gotcha. Yeah, so we figure out that these turnstiles are the machine that inverts stuff. You put it in one side, it comes out the other side inverted, vice versa. So that turnstile, and there's versions of that. So after this big fight scene, the person in the suit gets away. But then later he's talking to Priya, and again, she tells him this is the machine. Sater gets himself the inverted materials because she sold him bullets that weren't inverted. He inverted them. Then he realizes he needs to continue to get in with Sater in order to figure out how he's communicating with the future and figure out what's going on. He goes back to Kat, lies to her, tells her that the painting that Sater was using to hold her captive was destroyed, but he needs her to get an introduction, so they meet on the yacht. The dinner was crazy, and Ian brought up the fact that there was a worse torture. Ian, I'll let you tell us all about it.
I don't know if I want to talk about it. That gives me like the chills, man. I don't like that.
Oh, it's a fucked up way to kill somebody.
Yeah, he basically said he sliced his throat and then cut off his balls and put him down his throat and watch him try and get his balls out of his mouth while he died. Ugh.
He said nothing's more gratifying.
Sater is a Bond villain, man. He's like a Mission Impossible villain, just over the top, insane, and I love it.
Well, Kenneth Branagh is just twisted enough and subtle enough to play it great. But yeah, the line is he's like, we're going to take you to this garden, and I'm going to cut your throat, and I'm going to cut your balls off. Then I'm going to stick your balls in the hole. He goes, and there's nothing more satisfying than watching someone you hate choke to death trying to pull their own balls out of their throat. Oh, what the fuck?
Yeah, man, that was... Ugh.
Well, he starts by saying, have you slept with my wife yet?
Yeah, that's true.
And he's like, no, not yet.
Yeah.
What a great response.
Their interactions are all pretty damn impressive. So then he uses his knowledge of what happened at the opera house, the fact that they were trying to steal plutonium, to get in, saying that he can deliver that plutonium to Sator. So instead of killing him, Sator invites him to go sailing the next day on a speed catamaran, and they show up. And then the wife, who's pissed because the protagonist lied to her and she's still under the foot of this guy, of Sator, tries to kill Sator in the greatest way possible. She unhooks his fucking safety harness from these speedboats and lets him fall off by sheer force.
Sailboat. Yeah.
I thought he was dead.
Yeah, I did too.
The way he hits the water. And those things are hauling ass.
Dude, the scene where he confronts her in her bedroom and he takes off his cufflinks and then he takes off his belt.
Terrifying.
And then he puts the cufflinks like in the belt. I was like, oh man, I'm getting some childhood flashbacks here.
Oh, jeez.
Oh, Javier.
You know, that's actually how people with cufflinks, like, sometimes they store them that way. If they have enough belts that their cufflinks go with their belt, they'll actually store their cufflinks in the belt holes.
I think that's being really generous, JJ.
Oh no, that's not what the fuck this guy was doing. He was getting ready to beat the shit out of his wife with a fucking belt. Cufflink
Just
belt.
making sure we're all on the same page.
Yeah. No, I'm just saying that's not the most. It's also a way that they store, cufflinks. But yeah, he was getting ready to demolish her with that fucking shit. So then the protagonist sneaks below deck because a chopper comes in, delivers a big metal cylinder-looking item. He goes down, he's spying on him, and he gets caught spying as inverted gold comes through this, what turns out to be a time capsule. And he finds out this is how he's communicating with the future. As he buries a time capsule with information, then the future sends it back, and he then gets his gold. This is the part where Javier's talking about. Guy tries to steal a bar of gold, and Sator beats his ass and kills him with that same bar of gold. Then turns around and uses that bloody bar of gold to pay the protagonist for stealing the plutonium. That bar of gold got around.
Yeah, it did.
So I would love to be like surface level, love to be paid in a bar of gold. But like, what do I do with that? Right? Like, it's a Russian piece of gold. Like, I can't just like cash it in, right?
Oh, I've got an answer for this one.
Okay, lay it on.
Have you ever seen those commercials where you have to send in all your gold in like a bag, and then they'll like eventually put some money into your account? Just do that.
And you send it in to the guys that want your rings and shit. Send us your old jewelry.
Yeah, it's like, I'll just do that and send in grandma's like Holocaust ring.
Jesus. There you go, making my job hard again.
All right, I'm excited for the next part. This is where it gets good.
All this is like lead up. So we've now spent an hour getting to know the characters and the whole baseline of the problem. So now we got to steal the plutonium so the action picks up. So we go into this heist and the protagonist is telling Robert Pattinson, Neil, what he needs. And it's 4 large trucks, a car that's fast that doesn't look fast. One has to be a fire truck and they can't be the same. And it has to be off the books because the future can then tell him, Sator what's going on and prepare him for it. So yeah, I'll let you guys take over. What do you guys think of this heist scene?
Well, right off the bat, the fast car that's not fast, they went with a Beamer that looks fast. So,
well, in their defense, aren't they in Europe?
Yeah.
So having talked to like my brother who served this mission in Germany, he's like, look, like their Beamers, Audis, the cars that we would deem as like imported and cool here. He's like, that's just normal. So I believe that would have been more of a normal car there.
Yeah.
So if I want to be cool in Europe, I need to drive like a Ford around.
Probably.
I mean, does anyone else agree with that? That's what my little brother said.
That's absolutely true. It didn't bother me at all because I think they're in Germany or Russia. It might have been the Ukraine again, but yeah, in Europe, Beamers, all that stuff are normal to them. They're like Chevys and shit here.
I think that whoever hired those security guys should be fired because these big slow trucks slowly come up one at a time.
Right.
Go to the front, back, and they don't realize they're getting boxed in until the fire truck comes over. and then they're going to do something about it. Like, it just...
Do they get paid enough to care? That's
technically they're Ukrainian police, so no, probably not. That's what because that's who they say got a hold of because the team got away, but the Ukrainian police ended up with the plutonium. So it was the Ukrainian police. It wasn't a security group. That's why they were able to cut the radios off. And then you see back at Ukrainian police headquarters, the weirdos in the yellow Ukrainian police vests are like, radio's gone. And he's like, are they still moving? Yeah. Then what the fuck's the problem?
That is 100% how much I believe that police are invested in their jobs.
Well, and especially the guy that's sitting there not knowing that they're now surrounded by 4 very heavy trucks.
But like just like what Ian said, I was thinking that same thing. I'm like, move. There's not one, but 3 major red flags here.
Yeah, even if they weren't like, oh, we're going to get boxed in and the stuff's going to get stolen. For me, it would just be a comfort thing of like, I don't want to be next to this many semis.
So to speed us along a little bit, though, because then this is where the entropy gets a little weird with one of now a machine, aka a car that we see is driving backwards, but yet the people that are inverted, it feels like it's forwards for them. And that's where it was a little like, it was like a mind struggle for me to conceptualize that, but it sure looked cool.
Yeah, the car comes screaming up in reverse and they're like, what's this? And did you guys notice the bullet hole in the side mirror 2 or 3 times being prominently, quote unquote, subtly displayed at the beginning of the whole thing? And I'm sitting there going, okay, wait a minute. These guys know what this is and they don't notice the big giant bullet hole in their side mirror? What the shit? So that part I was a little weird. But yeah, so the car comes screaming backwards, turns out to be Sator and his group trying to get the now stolen item. And this is where you first realize they open up this orange case and the protagonist is like, I've seen a lot of freaking nuclear materials, and this is not plutonium. And Neil outs himself a little bit and says it's much worse.
Dawning on me a little bit more, that's kind of where he outed himself, because before in the movie didn't mean as much to you because you just thought he was saying that, but now we know he knew a lot more.
So Sator has Kat in the car, and using the threat of killing Kat gets the protagonist to throw the material to him, but in reality he takes it out before he throws the orange case. Then comes the worst part of this movie, in my opinion. They do this chase. The other guys get out of the car, Sator and his men, but they leave Kat in the car. The protagonist jumps from his car to her car and uses the tips of his 2 middle fingers, reaching with all of his might to push the brakes on a car that's speeding at highway speeds, and he stops it with what looks like just a little press of his fingers. And I'm like, I've been going that fast and had to hit my brakes that hard, and it's hard to do with the full force of both of my feet, and he did it with 2 fucking fingers.
Were you in an Audi?
Yeah, dude, it was a Beamer, man. Those are nice brakes.
I don't give a shit what it was. Those are the tightest brakes on the planet.
You know what my problem with the scene is? Let Kat die. Like,
yeah, that's what I was gonna say.
When it comes between her and plutonium, like having a terrorist get their hands on like a nuclear weapon, yeah, dude, you let that chick die.
That is true. That choice comes up like multiple times between Kat and the destruction of the world, and he always seems to have a hard time picking the
Ethan Hunt one. Paradox.
There you go.
Well, and it truly is a paradox when you get to the end of this movie and realize that if he hadn't, none of this shit would have worked out.
That is also very true.
Good point.
Oh, is that true?
Javier, I love you, sir. You're my favorite water skier, buddy. Yes.
Oh my gosh. Oh man, that would hit home for me.
Yes. That's going to be my intro. Yeah, dude, if she dies, this whole movie fucks up and the world's done.
Yeah, I'm laughing because I also get it. You know, I get why we're laughing.
Don't worry, Javier. When we get to the end, we'll come back to this conversation.
Go.
So before they could get out of the car, Sator's men grab Kat and the protagonist and take them to another of these inversion machines, the turnstiles. And this part was where the sound really got me, because they got masks on. They're talking in reverse and forwards because they're both in inverted and in real time simultaneously having a conversation between the two. So Sater's doing everything backwards. He's inverted with Kat, and the protagonist and Sater's men are going forward in time. And so they're using tape recorders and weird shit to kind of figure out what they're saying to each other. But they're having this negotiation. In the middle of this negotiation, trying to find the material because they don't know where it is because he got rid of it. Sater uses an inverted bullet, which we've been warned will do a lot of damage bouncing around within a body, to shoot Kat, and then leaves and goes to try to track where the protagonist has told Sater the material is. And then it cuts to this whole SWAT team of time guys, of inversion guys that Neil's friends with. He brings in the cavalry, so to speak, as he calls it. And they turn in this whole, we've got to save Kat. And Neil has to explain that he knows more than he's letting on because the protagonist has figured it out at this point. This scene really bothered me, guys. I'm not going to lie, because I had a hard time hearing anything. It wasn't until the second time that I watched it that I was able to pick up the whole conversation that happens between Sater and the protagonist here, because I hated that they did, and I know why they had to do it, but the fact that the first time they have the conversation, it's played in reverse mostly, except for protagonist side, and then they flip it, so then I hear both sides. That, I hated that. If you're smart enough to create a machine that can fucking flip you in time, you're smart enough to put a speaker box that translates backwards talk through the fucker, so that I don't have to deal with that. Just say
True.
it.
Yeah, that was definitely a chaotic scene, because you're trying to figure out what's going on while there's all these 3 conversations happening. It's a lot to process.
I did struggle with it. It pulled me out a little bit. Understand why it happened, but it was, and he had a face mask on, so he's hard to understand anyway.
I guess for me, it's just, I going back now, will I put those parts on subtitles when I watch a movie at home? For sure, I will. But I liked that I felt that moment was authentic, because it probably was hard to hear for the protagonist and make sense of everything. And that's kind of what I liked about this movie, where we were left in the dark trying to piece things together. And in those scenes, that's kind of what we were still doing. And it stuck true to the whole brand of the movie for me. So I was able to kind of let some of that slide. But yeah, you want to be able to hear in a movie. So totally understand.
One thing I like that they do is they've gotten really good at using the visual cues to clue you into what's happening. The masks, the red and blue armbands, the little medallion thing on the backpack. You see just enough to where if you see it the first time, it doesn't make sense, but you see it again and you're able to recall back to, oh, this is where I've seen this, or this is what this means now. But I think they do really, really well with using those visual cues.
It's true. I agree with that. Well, and the rooms are tinted in this one too. So they have it. I don't know if you guys noticed. I didn't notice till the second time. The one room's completely red. And the inverted side where Sater is, it's completely red. And then on the other side where the protagonist is, it looks normal, but if you watch, there is a bit of a blue tint to it. So they kind of lean into that whole red and blue throughout the movie visually until they smack you in the face with it at the end with, the 2 teams marked red and blue.
Yeah.
But yeah, then they go in and they explain, this is where he decides, I've got to go back and get the material. And he and Neil have this fight about, hey, you might just unintentionally trigger him getting it. What's happened. So he goes back anyway, and it's more to save Kat than it is anything else. Again, he ends up not, and Sater gets the material, which we find out at this point is part of an algorithm that was created and turned into a physical form and hidden from the future in the past that will allow the entire world's entropy to be reversed and destroy the world, basically. Sater's been trying to build this algorithm, put the pieces together, and this was the last piece that he needed, and he now has it. So he talks to Priya, telling her she needs to change what she does by, instead of sending him to dangle plutonium in front of an arms dealer, she refuses to do it, to change anything. So, and then tells him we wanted him to have it so that we can now get all 9 pieces back instead of just having 1 to keep from him. He wants to save Kat, as we've talked about. That's his main thing. So they invert Kat and they go back to they can't use the turnstile they're in, because if they go back in time, it's Sater's, they'll end up getting themselves killed by going there. So they know that there's another turnstile in Oslo that they'll have access to during the airplane heist where they blow everything up. So they do their inversion. They are on a boat going backwards. That's the cool scene one of the cool scenes you see in the preview. They're going backwards. They get themselves to Oslo, have a couple of conversations about time travel and the grandfather paradox in the middle of that. They have that conversation and, dive into the time travel. They get there, and this is when you learn that in the initial time they go into the airport to find out what's there, the fight between the protagonist and this man in the tax suit is actually, they're both the protagonist, one from the current time and the other from the future, who's now come back to the past to use that turnstile to save Kat. So you watch the fight in reverse from one side, where you watched it in reverse from the other side the first time.
Okay, I have a question here.
Yeah.
Okay. Before he goes in inverted, he is told that if he finds or interacts or touches his future or past self, that is self-annihilation. And then he immediately starts fighting himself. So how does that fit into the rules that were set?
Because she also clarifies and said, this is why we have the suits that cover everything, because it's your particles that have to come into contact. If you have this full body suit on that they're wearing that's covering every inch of your skin, your human particles won't touch his human particles. That makes sense. Mm-hmm. The particles that are touching are the suit and the uniform you're wearing and his particles. So that keeps because that whole thing is the matter of the same, you can't occupy the same space. Two different times can't occupy the same space.
So because he was in full tactical gear, that's how they got around that.
Correct. So that the particles
think
that
of it
are
like
touching,
a condom.
Exactly. It's like a battle condom.
Yeah.
Okay,
or
cool.
a time travel battle condom.
And having a baby is self-annihilation. I'm getting this. All right, cool.
Nicole, that wasn't directed at you or anything like that. I just want to speak for Javier there. He loves Jason.
No comment.
But yeah, that's their explanation, is their particles aren't actually meeting. It would be the suit's particles that are touching, not their own.
So it's me and Ian. I think Ian and I were actually saying like the same thing. Well, why was he then shooting at himself?
He wasn't. When you guys watch it the second time, what you can't see in the reverse when we watch it the first time from the original protagonist's version, you don't see it. It looks like he's shooting at his head. When you watch it the second time, there's a subtle little flip of the barrel of the gun every time he fires. He could have shot himself in the head, but he pulls it at the last second, and you have to watch it closely because it's going so fast. But if you watch it, he pulls it so that it's just missing him.
But why is he squeezing the trigger in the first place?
Because you got to make it seem real.
Why?
I'm with Javier on this one.
It's one of those things where what happens if you're on a full-out fist fight with someone and you can shoot someone from a tactical that's tactically smart, which we know the protagonist is. If he's not taking shots, your tactical brain goes, why isn't this guy taking shots at me? So it creates a different thought process. So he's thinking like himself on both sides of this. I have to take shots to make sure he fights me through this process to get to the end of this fight where I need to be.
Okay.
Because if
I'm gonna watch it again,
dude, I'm telling you.
Then that's what JJ's saying. It'd be weird because he'd be like, "Why isn't he fighting me?" And then the guy, if his original self found out that was him, I don't know what would happen to that dude mentally or where the things would have gone.
Well, and beyond that, from a tactical point of view, if you have a chance to take a shot and you don't at least try, and I know now you're not going to try, I'm going to kick your ass because I'm not worried about you shooting me. Does that make sense? He fires off 3 rounds. Oh shit, this fucker's trying to kill me. I need to be on the defensive to make sure I don't get shot. There's a whole tactical thought process that he's going, if I don't shoot at him, he's going to know I'm not going to shoot him, which gives him a tactical advantage. Whereas if I have him on the run thinking I'll shoot him if he gives me a half a second, I can keep the fight going in a way that gets us to the end without either of us getting hurt.
Okay, so to avoid hurting him, he shoots at him.
Correct. Knowing he's going to miss.
Sure. Yeah.
Mind fuck, dude.
I'm just going to log that one away for later. Okay, cool.
Oh, shit, that's funny.
Did both Neil and I don't know, we can't remember the protagonist's name.
He doesn't have
His
one.
name's the protagonist.
There we go, the protagonist.
Super clever.
Did they both go backwards in entropy? They came through backwards together in that scene, or did Neil go the other way?
So they both go backwards and forwards. So that's when you come through that turnstile, there's one of you on either side. Neil never goes through until he never goes back through. He goes through when they on their way to Oslo. He doesn't go back through until he's taking Kat with him. So at that moment, there's technically 3 protagonists. There's the one in the present when it happened and we watched it originally. There's one moving forward that's running past Neil that Neil chases and lets go. And then there's the one moving backwards through it that is in the midst of the fight that has to get through so that he can then be moving forward and they can go on with their plan. So you now have 3 protagonists that are out doing different things, either inverted or moving forward in time.
I didn't know there could be 3.
Well, in that location, there are 3 because there's one in the present.
But I guess it makes sense because there's 2. When you go in, there's you and the normal time and then the other time. And it's because of, that's weird.
If you watch Bill and Ted, there can be infinite amounts.
And this is why Bill and Ted is so much easier because they don't try to explain this shit, make it complicated. They just go, we fucking traveled in time, bitches.
And I hated that.
Okay, so here's one small problem, very small problem I had of this movie, is when at the very beginning, he's recalling the bullet from the slab, and the bullet loads into the magazine, and it doesn't chamber the round in the gun. And that, for some reason, still really bothers me because that's not how a semi-automatic pistol works.
Good catch, sir.
Thank you.
When he pulled the clip out and it was there, the magazine out, I'm like, shouldn't that be in the chamber? Because I was waiting for him to just pull the chamber back and see it.
Yeah.
But instead,
he should just rack it and it pops out.
Yeah.
You wouldn't see that mistake in John Wick.
Nope.
You wouldn't. You really wouldn't.
No, I saw that too. So I'm with you.
Or White House Down.
No, you just have the never-ending magazine is what he'd have in White House Down.
Maybe the bullet wanted to go home where it was most coziest in the magazine, okay? Who are we to say?
That's hilarious.
It's something small. It just really rubbed me the wrong way, you know?
No, I get it.
Just because you're all cool now and you know guns, Javier.
I'm a gun guy, guys.
So they save Kat using the Oslo turnstile. She's healed. By reverting her back into normal time, they're able to save her life. She has a giant scar, but then they realize that they need her because this heart monitor thing that Sator wears on his wrist all the time, though they think he's trying to be healthy, turns out to be a dead man's switch. As soon as he dies, his heart stops. The future is notified of that, and then an email blast goes out letting them know of a dead drop, which is where he is going to drop the completed algorithm. We find out that there was an explosion, and we find this out early, but it didn't matter until now. There was an explosion in the hidden Russian city where Sator is from on the 14th, which was the same day where the siege on the opera happened that we started this movie with. So all of this is taking place on the same fucking day, on the 14th. That same day was also the day that Kat had tried to show Sator that she still loved him in order to get her kid and try to make things work. He gave her the ultimatum, you can leave, but you can't ever see your son again. So she now, as the future self, has a chance to go back to that place, which is where he's going to kill himself after he's left. His past self is left to go be part of the siege. She's been sent to the island with the son, to Vietnam with her son, and he's coming back, his future self, to kill himself on that boat because it was a moment that they remember. So they plan this siege on the dead drop where these nuclear bombs were tested in Russia. She goes back to the boat to keep him alive until they steal the algorithm. They're going to allow the explosion to continue, and fucking everything goes off the rails for me from here. Like, this shit was nuts. And probably the only visual that was badass and I hated at the same time, that being this big battle scene where red team is moving forward in time with the knowledge of the blue team. They're doing this temporal pincer movement where the where the blue team has gone backwards in time and now comes out and is able to tell the red team exactly what happened so that they can plan for it and win. And you have to watch this shit happening at the same time. And it, like, visually, because I was trying to pay attention to so much, it bothered the shit out of me both times I watched it. Like, I couldn't focus on one thing during this scene.
I quite liked it. But need some explanation there, JJ. So the red team...
Yes.
Went back in time, but then entered the machine and now is going forwards again, like normal people.
Correct.
But the blue team never went back forwards, and therefore they knew what happened in that operation because it had happened for them already.
What the fuck did you just say?
No.
That is this whole movie. Like, I don't understand a word you just said.
That's all right. Here, I'll try to explain it. I'm not saying it's going to help you, Javier.
No, I'm not saying that Mattson did a bad job explaining. I'm saying I don't understand the situation at all.
Well, there was one thing that was incorrect. So while the red team is going backwards in time to get to the beginning of the 14th, the blue team is going forward in time, going through that process. They know what happens because they've gone through forward in it. Then they come back. They know what all the traps and all the bombs and everything has happened because they go through it. Well, they meet in the middle because the red team inverts after they've been going. They revert technically and are going forward in time again. The blue team then gets to the turnstile in the bottom and inverts so that they're going backwards at the same time that the red team's going forward.
And they know what happens because they were already there.
Exactly. So they've already been through it. So they're able to tell them once they get back and before everybody goes back again and runs it through one more time, they're able to share the knowledge that's there. It's kind of like when they were doing the heist, Sater tells his guy, I want you to tell me what's happening as it's happening because they can communicate while everything's going on. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it's a little confusing.
At the same time. Oh, it's very confusing.
Where I'm confused is because they came off backwards out of the crates. They already went through that battle, but how did they go through that battle if they just got there?
I understood it differently. I didn't think they were passing information to each other, but they were just both starting at the same time. Like the same time, like 10 minutes after and 10 minutes before. I don't know. I thought I had it, and then I listened to you explain it, and now I'm lost.
Well, and
because remember in the briefing, the people asked, why can't we see the blue team?
Because they were already at the end of it.
At the end of
the blue team is already at the end of the fight. They're sitting in the crates. Then when the whole thing starts, they come out of the crates backwards because they're moving back through the fight backwards to the beginning.
So we're saying the blue team, did they get re-inverted to go through the fight and then they inverted to go backwards through it?
The blue team never had to be reverted so when Neil at the end says he's going back in, he's going to have to invert again so that he can be part of that whole process one more time. What happened was that's why they won't. The guys say, why won't they let us see in the blue team? Maybe it's because we don't want to see what happens, because everybody that's dead on the blue team is dead because they've been through it forward in time. Now they've been inverted and are moving back through the fight and because they're at the end, they're able to tell the red team what to prepare for. And like they were able to coincide those two rockets that flipped that building and kill everybody at the same time on both sides. Because
why not just have them tell them from the crate? Like they'd be like, hey, this happened, this is going to happen, this is going to happen.
Well, somebody did. That's why they planned on it. That's where the communication came from. Was once Blue was in the crates, they just didn't let him out of the crates because they didn't want to see all the carnage and the death, because then as the red team, why do I want to do that, right?
Yeah.
So that's when they communicated, was at the end, and now they're synced up so that they're exactly hitting the end of it and the beginning at the same time, just in reverse.
I'm going to have to watch it again.
Yeah, you will. It's rough. It's a rough watch for sure.
Yeah, I was lost that whole scene. Like, I got the general gist of what we were trying to do, which was get into that little pit thing and stop the algorithm.
Yeah.
But the two teams moving through opposite of each other,
it looked cool.
No. And I knew I was missing it too when they blew up that building and like they timed it like just right. I'm like, I am missing something here. I don't know what it is, but I am.
There are certain parts of that fight, even watching it twice, I don't understand. Like that building getting blown up. I know it was cool, and I know the concept of how they did it, but I don't know why it worked the way that it did, because it's just confusing as shit.
Or why when you go into that machine, there's essentially two of you.
Yes.
That is created.
One going in, one coming out.
Then like Neil or the protagonist and such, what about these other them?
Well, that's where you get into your infinite. So Neil talks about when he asks when they're in the truck driving to go to Oslo, and the protagonist says, I figured something out. He says, if we're here, that means that we're successful. And Neil says, optimistically, yes. And he goes, well, pessimistically, there are infinite amount of alternate universes. So in theory, sure, they win and all that happens, but we don't know how many there's infinite. It goes back, Ian joked about Bill and Ted, but they're not wrong. When you're talking the theoretical physics of time travel, if one person can go back in time, that means there are infinite versions of each of us. There's no end to how many of us can be out there in the space-time continuum. Because you go back in time, you move on, you're still going to go back in time, so it's just going to repeat that process, and each one can do a different thing.
Yeah, this is some real like Rick and Morty shit right here. Okay, so really, we are not fighting to save the world. We're fighting to save this one reality, which it just seems like a lot of work if it's just one reality out of an infinite number of realities.
But it's tough because it's your only reality, and you don't know that any other reality is successful. If you go back to Endgame, right? There were 14 million different versions that Doctor Strange saw, and only one of them was successful at beating Thanos. How do you know that all the work they just put in this movie wasn't for the one universe that doesn't get destroyed? So that's why you got to be willing to put in the work.
Okay, so here's my big question, because I've been waiting all podcast to ask you this, JJ. I don't understand how the death at that particular moment of Sator works, because I don't get how he's where he is and doesn't know what's going on that boat, and he's killed, but yet.
Well, that's future Sator that went back, right?
Yes.
So that Sator does know everything that's going on. That
Sator, he doesn't know what's going on the boat because it's the first time happening to him.
Yes. So if he were to die there, how does he then do all the other stuff that he did in the future?
He doesn't do anything in the future. That's as future as Sator gets, is that version of Sator that she kills in the end.
Yeah.
He doesn't do anything in the future. It's the future. He's just communicating with the future. They're the ones. So, for example, when he dies, his thing sends out an email saying that the algorithm is buried now in this location in Russia. They then in the future know to go there because nobody's going to, in the future, nobody knew where that place was until he tells them.
I'm not worried about that part. I'm worried about like, how does he die there? But then all this other stuff that has happened with interacting with him has happened. Like the whole movie where he's in all these other spots.
Yeah.
How does he go? That can't happen because they went back to kill him. And then you know what I'm trying to say?
I do. But I think what you're missing is that version of Sator inverted himself and went back in time to be on that boat at that moment.
But if that's the case, wouldn't he know that there's more than one cat?
No, because he's in his future. He's not on the boat at the time. So, okay, here's the part with the boat. He leaves to go to the opera. In the present on the 14th, Sator gets on a chopper, leaves the boat, goes to the opera when they're attacking the opera. He sends his wife and kid to Vietnam or wherever he sends them off the boat so that he can leave. The future Sator now comes back. So the past Sator has no idea what's happening on that boat because he's at the opera. And every other Sator from there on is moving forward from the opera. Only the future Sator is now on this boat. He thinks that his wife and son are gone, but his wife, the future cat, is now on this boat with him, which is why she's saying she's kind of freaking out because she's now in two places in that same time frame. She's on that boat with the kid coming back. She's on the boat. He still has no idea what's happening because everything he's done. It's
a loop of Sators.
Just so you know, this whole movie is a giant causal loop, and he's at the end of the causal loop.
Then I guess where my misunderstanding is coming from is I didn't know that Sator was on the boat and then went to the opera, and the future one came back because I don't get why he would come back.
Because they showed a scene on that, it's quick, where he's in like the shorts and a t-shirt, like the gray t-shirt, and then I thought I saw him like either getting on the helicopter, because then the Sator we see is in the white shirt and looks different than the Sator that was in the Vietnam boat scene that you saw previously.
Well, and she makes a comment when she gets on the boat. He says, I thought you took the boat with our son, with Max. And she said, I thought you were on the helicopter and left. And so they have this thing where they both know that in reality, they both know, in theory, they should have both known that these weren't the present time because he knows he's future, but he thinks she's present. She knows that both of them are future, but she has to play that she's the present, which is why she's acting like, hey, I want to try to fix things. I came back because I wanted to see you and talk about what happened. And then he says, I was joking about the whole threatening to take her son away. She can either leave or never see her son again.
Okay. So there's, I'm going to watch it again in the next day or two, and I'm going to look for that because that's, I think, what threw me off.
You'll catch it. And she makes the comment when they're figuring out where he'll be. The reason that future Sator goes back to that moment is because it was the last time he felt like she was trying to love him. And for all of his bullshit, and you can see it at the end, he loves her. He even says, we know my opinion of you is much higher than your opinion of me. He actually does love her. He's just a piece of shit, and he's dying, and he's wrapped up in all this garbage, and he tells the protagonist over the phone at the very end, look, I sold my soul for more time. So he knows he's a piece of shit, but he loves her, and he's always wanted her. So he goes back because that was the last good moment that they had. That's why he chooses to die there.
Gotcha. That makes more sense.
JJ, just for the sake of my remembrance, explain to me again why this algorithm was pulled apart, because they didn't want people to find this, but then someone in the future was like, no, I do. I'm going to screw everyone. Is that right?
Kind of.
Like, that's what I...
So, yes, when it was invented, they compared it to the atomic bomb. So when Oppenheimer created the atomic bomb, he got scared that theoretically when you set off the atomic bomb, it could have continued to fission forever and destroy the whole world. So they almost didn't use the nuclear bomb, but then they did. Oppenheimer says, that's fine. We're going to go ahead and do it. They compare this scientist that created the algorithm to Oppenheimer, only she'd made the other choice. She said, I'm not going to just say, let's go ahead and do it. She said, this can't happen. She rebelled. She broke it into 9 pieces, put it in that physical form, and then sent it back in time and hid it amongst the nuclear materials because they wanted to use it. And in her mind, it could do one of two things. It's either going to invert the whole world, the flow of time, destroy the past except for the moment where they invert, or it's going to destroy everything, everyone, and nothing exists anymore. And she wasn't willing to have that be on her conscience. So she decided to separate it and send it to the past so that it could never be used.
And then, but someone wanted to use it to do that very thing and try and end the past.
Yeah, they obviously wanted to do it. And Sator explains that the oceans have risen, meaning global warming has melted the ice caps, and their rivers have dried up. So they have no way they're basically dying. And so they need to reset the flow of time so that those that are living in the future can continue to live in spite of the past. And so there's still the grandfather paradox. What happens if you kill all your ancestors? They don't care because they're that desperate.
So we're saying if they killed everyone up to that point, then there would be the Earth would basically be in its infantile stage, almost in a sense, without all the pollution and everything, therefore ready for them to continue to live.
Correct. Or at least they would be able to live their life in reverse until they got there, because you can see that they can still function inverted.
Oh, because they'd be going backwards in a sense.
And they can still live inverted. It's just everything feels backwards. They're doing everything in reverse.
But it's better than
being dead.
All right. So then, and then the other question, Priya, where does she fit within it? She wanted it to be found, and because that's that confused me too. Like, what was her motivation?
So let's finish up how this ends, and then we'll come back to that, because that's explained at the end of. So the reason they wanted it found, she says, yes, we want him to have all 9 pieces because it's the only way to get the other 8. We knew this was the last one. We wanted you to fail so that he got the last piece, because now we have all 9 pieces together, so we can get them all and separate all 9 pieces again and keep them so that no one knows where all 9 are. So that's her motivation. That's her orders that we find out later. So basically at the end of this battle, we've got 3 Neils. One Neil takes a bullet so that he can unlock the door, allowing the protagonist to get through that locked door and stop the time capsule from being dropped. The other Neil tries to get in and save them by honking the horn. And then the one, of course, moving backwards is the one that he ends up flipping, and we talk to him later. But so Neil is like the savior of this whole plan, because he ends up driving him out of because Kat kills Sator early. Brutal death scene, by the way. What a great fucking death scene. She shoots him in the chest because she refuses to let him win. She's already been setting up. She knew exactly what she was going to do, because she unhooked those chains, puts the sunblock on the deck, and then slides his ass off. And when he smacks his head on the side of that boat. That was the second time I made an audible noise. Because then he flips over and you see his fucking loosey-goosey neck fall into the water. I was like, oh, that was so brutal. Yeah. So she killed.
It was like that scene from Titanic where the dude bails off and hits the rudder, you know?
Ugh.
It was beautiful. And the sound that, and of course, Chris Nolan, it's always so fucking loud. You just crunch. So she kills Sator early. The hard part about that is if they don't get the algorithm out of the hole, it will be buried in the future. We'll have it and they're done. Neil saves them, drops a rope down into it that pulls them out so they're able to get the algorithm out and kill Sator, so the future is safe for now and the present is safe in the past for the time being. And then Ives, the general, so to speak, of the army or the cavalry, doesn't kill all three of them for knowing what's there, but separates it, gives each a piece and says, we hide it, then we take our own lives as the only way to be sure no one ever knows where they're at. But each man can decide when they're going to do that. And then we find out that Neil and the protagonist Neil's known, in my opinion, and this is my opinion, Neil has known the basics of what was going to happen and how, to a certain degree, it was going to happen from the very beginning. He was recruited by the protagonist many, many years from this moment that we're in now in the future. And then he's worked his way backwards as the reverse part of the pincer movement, this whole giant temporal pincer move to the point where they actually save the world. And then Priya. So then we find out we see Priya. He gives Kat a phone and says, if you ever have a problem, call this number. Don't just say an address or where you're at, speak into it. And she says, well, who's going to get it? And he says, posterity. Then you see Priya getting ready to kill her because she knows too much. And then the protagonist jumps in the back of the car, kills Priya, tells her, we've both been working for me this whole time. I am the protagonist, which I thought was just a fantastic line and scene. So that's her thing, was just to make sure that they lost that piece to Sator so that they could get all 9 back.
Need to watch this movie again.
Yeah, you have to. I will watch it again just to try to solidify my knowledge of what I think might have happened in this movie.
So, but is Sator, is he really dead?
So, future Sator is dead. But if you're following the whole infinite universes, based on the fact that every time you invert, there's a second version, one moving forward, one moving backward. In theory, right, there are infinite numbers of Sators out there, just not from that moment forward in that timeline. Time travel's rough. So I did have a couple of quotes that were really impressive to me, just a couple, and they were very deep. I was really impressed with the end of this movie, that being so the whole Neil knowing him and they were friends, and you can tell that they've developed this bond, but he's asking him these questions. He says, what's happened? What's happened's happened. And I love that line. He uses it throughout the movie. He says, and he explains why he says it. So what's happened's happened, which is an expression of faith in the mechanics of the world, but not an excuse to do nothing. And then the protagonist says, fate. He says, call it what you want. And he asks him, what do you call it? And he says, reality. Now let me go. And then he says, and then he finds out that we meet in the future. You recruited me. He goes, this is the end of a friendship for me that's been going on for years. And he says, it's just starting for you. He says, we get up to some stuff. You're going to love it. We get up to some stuff as he's walking away. And then he's got, of course, the final lines. And those are, we're the people saving the world from what might have been. The world will never know what could have happened. And even if they did, they wouldn't care, because no one cares about the bomb that didn't go off, only the one that did. It's the bomb that didn't go off, the danger that no one knows is real. And that's the one with the real power to change the world. So I just really love that it's just giant. The whole fucking movie is a giant causal loop. If one thing hadn't happened, the next thing wouldn't have. And without the beginnings, you can't have the end. So it's just this crazy causal loop that I just really found interesting. So it's a lot.
Goodness.
All right, should we rate it?
Yeah, let's do it.
Let's do it.
Javier, let's start with you.
Okay. Well, I don't really know what I watched. It was very confusing. And after discussing it for an hour and a half, I still don't really know what I watched. So I don't know if that's a really good movie or a really bad movie. I will say that the effects and the action was really fun. The acting was incredible. I think I'm going to give this a 2.5 because...
Wow.
I don't know if I can give a movie that I didn't really get much higher than that. So I will probably watch it again, though, if that helps. But not because I loved it, but because I didn't know what happened. Anyway, yeah, I'm going to give it a 2.5. And yes, I'm going to watch it again out of necessity.
Cool. I enjoyed this movie. I really thought that the visuals were amazing. It had great music, even though it was really too loud in some parts, but that's a typical Christopher Nolan thing. The dialogue was on point. I thought the storyline was great. It kept twists. I loved that it gave you enough information to figure it out on your own if you paid attention, but it never actually gave you too much. The exposition was never over the top. They would explain it and then they'd skip right past stuff and continue on with the story. So I liked it. I liked that it makes me think. I've been battling for 2 days now on whether I want to call this a perfect movie or give it a 4.5. I'm going to lean in and give it a 5. And that's because I've given 5s in the past based on the type of movie. So if I'm watching a movie that's like the 5 I gave, it has to be better than that for me, or as good to give it a 5. This movie, in the case of, a temporal time travel, science fiction, really fun. I think it's up there with what I would have given a 5 in the past, being Inception. So I will give it a 5. There are things to me that could have been done better, but not enough to negate the fact that I think it's the best of what it is right now. So Mattson.
Whew. Goodness. Very well acted. Love the music. Love that this movie made me think. You guys have heard me in other podcasts. Like, a making of a great movie for me is a movie that gives me a reason to go see it again, but gives me a reason to talk about it and think about it. And I'm having a hard time thinking of a movie that has given me more. I mean, I couldn't sleep last night. I kept thinking about some of this movie, and there are other things, but I love that fact about it. I love that I am a little confused, and it gives me a reason to go watch it again, to look for those little Easter eggs and things. I'm not going to give it a 5. I'm going to give it a 4.5. One of the reasons being the audio, for one, just need to be a little bit more clear. And I do want to respect that while I really enjoyed it, there's a lot of people out there like a Javier that if more could have been explained maybe a little bit better or been more straightforward, would this movie have been a 5? Yes. And while Christopher Nolan did take some professional liberties on what Inception was and how it worked, to me, it made more straightforward sense in my mind about, okay, as I was watching it, I get this. Whereas with Tenet, which I don't think is a knock for me, but I just try and think about it from the general population, where there's going to be a lot of people that may never get this movie. But that's what I think makes this a great movie. And I really like that that's how this movie was played out. They never gave you more than was needed. So then you as a viewer are always still kind of left wondering, well, what is this movie about? What is this concept of inversion? And for me, it worked. So it's not perfect, but it is a very, very well done movie. 4.5. Go see it in theaters. Go see it again. Talk with your friends about it. Listen to our podcast.
Ian, wrap us up.
So after I got out of this movie, I sent JJ a meme of Oprah Winfrey, and I just felt like, you get a 5, you get a 5. They all got 5s. I absolutely loved this movie. In fact, I'm probably going to go see it again tonight because I'm telling other people that it's worth it. So especially being in the theater, Christopher Nolan stuff is, kind of heavy on the audio, a little loud, but I don't really mind that. I think it kind of adds to the experience, like feeling the rumble in your seat in a movie theater. Like, I love that. And it was part of the movie here as well. Gave you tons to think about. Rewatchability is super high. Like, I thoroughly enjoyed the acting, the different characters, and piecing together this theatrical puzzle was just so much fun. So 5 for me, definitely rewatching it.
Sweet. So yeah, thanks for joining us. It was a long one. It's a great movie though. Lots to talk about. Go see it. It's fun. Great scores, with the exception of Javier, which I fully understand why he rated it. I fully expected him to come in where he came in, or at least close, because it's just one of those movies that doesn't fit within his wheelhouse. So
it's like my friend that I saw with Landon, like he even told me he didn't think the acting from the protagonist was very good, and he does not like Christopher Nolan movies very much. I was like, Landon, you are in the minority here, man. It was very well acted. He thought he came off as like arrogant. I was like, well he was. Maybe he's just confident in his skills because he's like a total badass.
Yeah, he was very arrogant, which I loved. I thought that made sense. This arrogant man in a world he doesn't understand. So anyway, Mattson, why don't you tell them where they can find us?
Yeah, you can find us wherever good podcasts are found: Spotify, Apple, Google, many others. Social media on the big 3, Facebook, Twitter, and the Insta. And check out our website as well at whatsourverdict.com. Come join in the conversation. As you know, many movies are coming out. We are definitely watching them. Come join the discussion, subscribe, and check us out on YouTube as well.
Definitely. So tomorrow, if you're listening to this on Monday, tomorrow we'll be releasing Mulan. And next week,
we're also going to have The Boys, the first, 3 episodes coming out too, JJ, on our TV?
Yep. The first 3 episodes are released this Friday, so we're going to have to figure that out. with no new movies, no big major new movies coming out in theaters next week, after this and Mulan, we're going to jump back into some old movies that we have picked and ready to rock. We'd love to hear your ideas. If you want to get some on our list, send them over to us through the ways that Mattson told you can. But we will be doing heavyweights, taking it back to a summer classic to end the summer. It's a Mattson request, so his list, and we'll be doing that one. That'll release a week from today if you're listening on Monday. So check that out. Enjoy. We appreciate you following and jumping in and listening, and we'll catch you on the next one.
Boy.
Bye-bye now. Cinemagic out.